Dora, thank you. I wanted to address an issue that I think is important in terms of the ongoing campaign around human rights for the people of Palestine, justice for the people of Palestine, and that is, what is our attitude to the Jewish people in the state of Israel? What should be the stance of people who believe in justice to those who have settled there and are making their lives there? Because they demand of the world certain things. The Israeli state and its political leaders demand of the world that the world recognizes Israel. Not only that, they've actually escalated that a little bit, you see, because there was a little bit of a problem, and I want to take a little bit of time, and I'm sorry about that, but they have escalated that demand from not just recognizing the state of Israel, but recognizing the state of Israel as a Jewish state, the state of Israel as an exclusive state, the state of Israel effectively as a racist and apartheid state, because that is what they are asking the world when they ask the world to recognize that state as a Jewish state. But because even on their own citizenship numbers, 1/4 of the people who live in that state, at least the internationally recognized borders that were established in 1948, that the people who live in that state, at least 1/4 of its citizens, are Palestinians of Christian or Muslim descent and belief in today's world, or non-belief as the case may be, but they are not and have never been Israelis of the Jewish faith. So their demands of the world to recognize this state is, in my view, to demand something akin to that the world recognize the New Zealand state as the white Protestant republic of some sort. Anyone who proposed such a demand that the world should recognize the New Zealand state as a white Protestant or Anglican or Catholic or Christian, some sort of republic, because that is the beliefs of the majority of people who live here, would be considered raving mad, a raving racist, a raving lunatic to want to exclude the indigenous people of the land in which they are living as partners to be equals in a society. The problem the world has, they demand we recognize them. They demand we recognize them as a religious or an ethnically exclusive state. But there's a problem with it. They will not and have never defined the borders of that state. There is no Israeli document that has the borders defined for the state of Israel. Not one. Not one. Never has been. Never has been. Not the 48 border, not the 1967 border. In fact, every publication that's put out in Israel has areas. And the areas include the biblical names, Judea and Samaria for the area that's the West Bank, that we commonly know as the West Bank, is simply Judea and Samaria in the Israeli definition. They do not define their own borders. The 1948 borders, the 1967 borders, the wall they've established within the occupied lands of 1967, none of these are established. The annexation of half of the Jerusalem city after the 1967 war, none of these are defined on any Israeli map or citizenship document or so on. So when they demand that we recognize this thing, we should demand of them, what is it? What is that thing that you want us to recognize? There is, because they will not and never have defined that thing. They have made demands on the world that are intolerable. They have made demands on the world that have allowed them to establish their state as an apartheid state. Yes, they recognize the 1/4 of the population that lives within the land they conquered in 1948. And there's a thing about that, you see. The 1948, even the 1948 borders were a product of conquest. The land was divided by the United Nations into Palestinian and Jewish lands. And the people who established the Jewish state conquered a significantly more part of the territory of 48. So Israel, the 1948 Israel, which was recognized by the United Nations, was a land already of conquest and expulsion, but that state is the only state in the United Nations that had a condition put on its recognition. That condition was that those people who had fled as refugees in 1948 would be allowed to return. The United Nations says, we will recognize your conquest, loathsome or not, approved or not, we will recognize that conquest and the expulsions that have happened so long. We will recognize this new state so long as you allow those people who fled as a consequence of that war the right to return. And they have never allowed those people the right to return. They lost the right to have the recognition of their state, their 1948 state. They lost the right to have that state recognized by refusing to meet a condition the United Nations established for that recognition. Furthermore, the 1967 state, which is a bigger state, which includes all of the West Bank, and for a long time and still de facto includes the Gaza Strip, the 1967 state has actually existed longer than the 1948 to 67 state. This state, the post-1967 state, has existed for half a century. That is like, and the millions of people who have lived in subjugation and apartheid, military control and all the rest of it that's associated with that occupation, those people have lived there longer than the people of South Africa lived in their apartheid state before it was finally destroyed. We do not and should not recognize apartheid states. We should demand they be dismantled. We should demand that all of the people of that region live in freedom. Kia ora.